Hi there. My name is Clay Williams, and this is People Talks, presented by Canal Pursuit Productions. The idea behind People Talks is that everyone has a story, and everyone's story has value. Value to people who hear the story, and value in even in just telling the story. In the weeks ahead, we'll have a mixture of people with lived experience, as well as people who work in health and fitness fields, one speaker each Sunday. The format is Instagram Live videos. If you're watching this live, please leave reactions and comments. If there are any questions, I'll try to catch those as we go through the talk and ask our speaker at the end of the run, or end of the run, at the end of the talk. Our speaker today is Ginny Megin. Ginny is a retired elementary school teacher and the mother of two grown children. She's been a runner for over 40 years, running a dozen marathons as well as tons of other short races, and ran 50K on her 50th birthday, raising over $3,000 for nuclear disarmament. She spent 3 months volunteering at a Canadian charity called Child Haven in a children's home in India. She's currently the president of the Burlington Runners Club. In Ginny's words, I understand the strong need I have for community, for connection, for real people, for caring people in my life. I saw that when I saw what Clay was doing, and I signed up to do 10K. I understand that for my life to have meaning, for me, I need to give back, because despite so many challenges, I have a great life. What a great introduction. I'll connect Ginny and we can hear from her. Bear with me for just a moment. I'm going to connect right now.
Hello.
Hello, I think she's there. Hi, Ginny. How are
Hi.
you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
All right. I'm glad we had the little run through the other day. We got the techie stuff taken care of, and all
I have a
set.
battery plugged in here. I'm 98%. I think that's good. No battery, personal battery holds out, will be fine.
All
I am
right.
trying to improve the lighting though. Your lighting is much better than mine.
What do I have here? So I've got a great big window over here, and I've got a light on the side here, and a big screen TV right in front of me that's lighting me up a little bit.
Oh, a big screen TV. That's probably a good idea. All right. All right. Well, that's about as good as I'm going to get here.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's all
Anyway,
right.
it's not so great. Okay. I, I'm trying to get some light on the subject. I'm trying to throw some light on the subject.
There
All
are a few
right.
subjects. We had a little talk earlier, and there are a lot of things we could talk about today. But
Yeah.
let's get started. Who are you? And um, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Okay. That may be all you have to ask. I will see.
All right.
Anyway, thanks for inviting me. I'm Ginny Megin. I'm 70 years old now. I'm a retired teacher, elementary school teacher. I think Clay told you all this stuff. So anyway, um, so when I started to think about what I wanted to say, I kept approaching it from different angles, and I really struggled with trying to find out how to make it cohesive. So I gave up, and and basically, there's Ginny the runner, Ginny the person who has experienced mental illness myself, although not the kind of serious debilitating mental illness that some people, especially my family, have had. And the third topic, which is really a big one for me, is my family of origin. So, yeah, how I started running, I'll start with running because it's kind of a nice topic. Running was a fad in the 70s, and I was an overweight smoker. I never did much sports in high school or university. I ran around, played outside all the time as a kid. Um, and then I went through that phase of like from, 13, 14 till my 20s, I was really out of shape and smoked. I started smoking when I was 16. And I was 21 or so, and I couldn't even get my breath going up a flight of stairs, and that scared me. So I started jogging as this fad once every couple of months. And then what happened was my husband Tony and I have been married now 46 years, but him and I had been together for actually, it must have been 1972 because we were already getting together by then. I met him in 71. And we did this trip around the States before I immigrated to Canada because I'm from Boston, Massachusetts. And so we were traveling, and this was way before cell phones or any internet or anything. We even had cash. Like we didn't have traveler's checks. We were just completely solo there. And we were together 24/7. It wasn't even an expression. It was 24 days, 24 hours, 7 days a week when I used to tell that story. So then he's not a morning person. And if I get up in the morning and he said something that wasn't friendly, because I'm all chirper in the morning, my day would kind of be stuck and I would have a hard time getting beyond that. And so I noticed if I went out for a run, I felt better. And I wouldn't care if he said something because he was awake, he hadn't had his coffee yet or whatever, and I'd get to see some of where we are. And I remember originally thinking, boy, people who run the same routes all the time, that is so boring. Well, after we settled down in Hamilton, I did the same route in Hamilton for years, and I loved it. And there was a run down at the Gage Park on Sundays, and that I used to get these certificates. My first race was St. Joseph's. It was a 10K, and I loved it. And then I ran the Burlington Road Race, 15-miler. And I loved it. And it was like, bring on the marathons, is what I said at the beginning. And I think I'm the kind of, my brain and my body, I joke around and say I'm built like an Irish peasant. And I get the endorphins, and I just really love it. So the first marathon I ran was the Skylon, and we drove down to Buffalo and went through customs in this high school gym in Buffalo. Can you imagine today? And I got to run over the Peace Bridge. And there's a guy painting his house. He goes, "Oh, that looks like hard work." I said, "Rather be doing this than painting the house." So running has really, I would say 80% of running has been my mental health. It's been really good for me, really, really good for me. And I just started it, I think, as it was a fluke of timing and circumstance. I really admire people that add running to an already full schedule. It's very impressive because I had this freedom to get me off and running, so to speak. So I think what I will do is and obviously, like, if I'm going to talk about myself from these different perspectives, they do melt into each other. And so the timeline might not be as straightforward as I would try to normally hope it would be, but it is what it is.
We'll be recording this, and people can play it back several times to figure out the timeline. Don't worry.
I wish it was that interesting. Anyway, yeah, my family of origin was really difficult. My parents, I'm going to talk about my parents. My father went to Notre Dame. He was very lucky, during the Depression. My mother went to a high-end women's college, Catholic women's college, very bright woman, editor of a newspaper. They were the first generation where drinking was cool. My father was in the Navy. They had cocktails. He finally ended up getting sent overseas, but didn't see any fighting. And they got caught up in that whole world, I think in Canada that came much later because it was like the men's entrances and the women's entrances sat here. But in the States, drinking was cool in the 40s and the 50s with the middle class, and they were the first middle class. And I originally at one point was going to call this Surviving Rising Expectations because they were some of the people that didn't. F. Scott Fitzgerald and his wife Zelda, who had mental illness, they didn't survive the alcohol-infused society. The other thing that affected my parents is that I think my mother had a tendency towards mental illness anyway. And my mother had one brother who never married. My father was an only child. And they had this fantasy that having a big family would make you happy. And they were good Irish Catholics, so they had 6 kids in 8.5 years. And I was the sixth. And my little sister was born 5 years later. They say she was a change of life baby, unexpected. I think I was kind of unexpected too. I was only 13 months younger than my brother Ned. And they didn't know what they were doing. They were way over their heads, way over their heads. My father, especially, he just kind of, I think emotionally kind of checked out in some ways. He was a very successful high school football coach. You can imagine, it's like out of the movies, Concord, Massachusetts, the home of the revolution, you know, beautiful, beautiful little town, the pillar, the church, you know, peak in town. And he was like a hero because football was the thing. Like we were in the parade and all that stuff. And then you know who his drinking buddy was the chief of police, two alcoholics in this little town, right? This was back in the day where it was shameful. It wasn't an illness, it was shameful. Mm-hmm. And the rumor was that he used to like to feed my mother drinks because then she would be easier to get along with. And so did her nagging drive him to drink? Did his drinking drive her to nagging? I think it was all of the above. But it was a mess. And so the good news is that I survived, I think, from being around school, especially school. And I think I grew up and became a teacher because I just went from one side of the desk to the other. I read a book when I grew up called Adult Children of Alcoholics. Nobody knew that what happens is when your parents are alcoholics, you have two mothers and two fathers. You have the one who's drunk and the one who's sober. And they're different people. And as a child, your brain is trying to make sense out of something that doesn't make any sense. So adult children end up being either very responsible or very irresponsible. And some of us went one way and some went the other. And the four girls, all managed better than the four boys. And my oldest siblings grew up in the 50s, got pregnant and married in that order, two sisters and a brother. And the four youngest grew up in the 60s. And it was not get married. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll and everything else. And so I went to university in Boston in 1968, right in the middle of it all. And I'm very lucky that nothing bad to me. I took a lot of risks. I broke laws. It was really, it was partly rebelling against the background I had and partly the times. And so I drank heavily. I started drinking in high school. I drank when I got to university, and then I switched over to drugs. And I have a compulsive personality. I have an addictive type personality. And I told you that story about my family because I think it was a combination of genetics and environment that have given me these characteristics. So I'm going to tell you one of the things that really helped me understand when people say running is an addiction. There was a book came out years ago called Positive Addictions. I don't know if it was by Ellis or who it was by, and I don't remember most of it, and there's probably much better books now, but what he said is that all negative addictions have certain common characteristics. And he talked about heroin or cigarettes, doesn't matter, minor or major. One characteristic is that they give you instant gratification. And another characteristic is that they take energy away from the rest of your life. And he said positive addictions also have certain common characteristics. And one of them is that they have delayed gratification. And the other is that they give energy to your life. So that when people say you're addicted to running, I say, well, yeah, and this is why. But the whole thing about this delayed gratification, Clay and I were talking about this a bit earlier. And what it is it's about learning to work at something and before you get the payoff. And one of the examples he uses in the book is what a plane does. So an airplane uses, and I'm making up these numbers. I asked the pilot, he wouldn't give me a clear number. But let's say a plane uses 40% of its fuel on takeoff, another 30% during the flight, and 20% on landing. And so when people say, oh my gosh, you run, it's amazing, they're thinking of the takeoff. They're thinking of that 40% of energy of getting started. They don't know that we plateaued a long time ago. Even if I don't run for 6 months, I don't sweat going out running again because I know I'm going to get the gratification. The people that never do it, they don't get it. excuse me, that's true of anything. They talk about those 10,000 hours. And I never learned about cause and effect or try hard and see the payoff. I didn't learn that as a kid. You know, my parents, they just weren't able to do it. My father committed suicide when I was 12 years old. My mother had a first nervous breakdown when I was 3 months old. It's a psychotic episode, right? And actually, ironically, what has killed more people in my family are cigarettes. Because, anyway, yeah. So I believe that what happened was through school and through a number of other places, I learned about sticking with things and not giving up on things. And so I gave up cigarettes, I gave up drinking, I gave up drugs, I gave up nail biting, I gave up a lot of things. But the one thing I could not give up was eating, because we have to eat. So I spent 16 years in Overeaters Anonymous. And then she left for a number of reasons. But if anybody's ever interested in 12 steps, it's worth a try. I know they're a little bit out of date now. But the thing is, I was listening to what Reed said in the last talk, and I would say to people in OA, you know me better than my husband does, because I come here every week and I can have a good week and tell you what's going well. I can be having a bad week and you listen to me and there's no judgment, no judgment. And Reed's right. It seems odd that, you know, like I'm a white woman, I've got all this privilege. I know I do. But like he said, mental illness is something that's been ongoing. And it's the same with feminism. Like I've been a woman my whole life, and we're not talking about women so much now, a little bit like the Me Too movement, but just because the world has moved on and it's not focusing on what is causing us pain, to me, that's not to diminish what we've suffered at all. And I think especially for guys, it is hard to. And so OA was my place where I could open up and share non-judgmentally. And I want to say the same thing to all of you, like to anybody that has struggling, try to, you know, and the thing is, I thought about this, but, you know, I've gone over this in my head a number of times what I was going to say, but I would say that especially to guys, if you want to share with somebody, tell them up front, you're not asking for advice. That's the first thing they're going to want to do. Don't ask, I'm not asking. And my husband, I kept telling him that, and he kept looking at me like, why are you talking to me then? You know, we're supposed to fix things. And it took him many, many times before he realized just getting it off my chest was the best thing I could do. And that really what it says is that we have the answers within ourselves when we slow down and stop being so judgmental. Because that was another thing with the Catholicism that I learned was very destructive, very guilt-inducing. And I know people who are Catholics that are happy, that are healthy emotionally, but that's not the Catholicism I grew up with. And eventually I found the Unitarian Church, which has been a great community for me. I found the running community, and I've started doing a lot of meditating. I went to a retreat about 7 years ago, and I do now, because of the pandemic, I do online meditating, and I do yoga. I've done yoga. I think yoga has been one of the things that's helped me stay injury-free over the years. So, you know, I said I was going to talk about my family, I was going to talk about running, I was going to talk about my own mental health struggles. So I've kind of touched on all of those. And I did hear you say that question, how did you know that you were out of control? I had lunch with a couple of friends one day, and we were having a nice meal. And I said, you know how sometimes you just feel like you feel like eating even though you're not hungry? And they looked at me like, no. So I knew that. But as far as the drinking goes, I mean, I can't drink, because I can drink socially for a while, and after a few months I get drunk and I say things that should never be said. So it's pretty clear that I can never drink again. Yeah. So what other questions do you have for me?
Are you ready?
Yeah. Go.
Something you didn't talk about is if you've ever had a formal diagnosis of of a mental illness, depression, anxiety disorder, anything?
No, I haven't. And that's why I said that. That actually, I went to a treatment center for a week. And then and then a couple of years later, when the doctor was putting his files on the computer, he forgot. He said, "What is this? Is this a mistake?" I said, "No, I did go to a treatment center for a week because I'm an adult child of an alcoholic and I have issues." And so, no, I have not been, but I know I have a compulsive, obsessive, addictive personality. And luckily, I think a lot of my older siblings' mistakes are what helped drive me not to make those mistakes. I had a brother that died of alcoholism at 29. I had a brother who died who was an alcoholic, went to AA for 40 years. I had a brother who died, he was over 300 pounds. He had congestive heart problems, diabetes. My sister is younger than me, so we don't have, she says she's depressed. No, we don't, we just get this garden variety that we get hardcore. That's what I'd say.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked for a while when I first met you. You ran quite a ways with me. Actually, you ran on the same day that I was running with another Virginia Kahn, right?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, in 2016, I think.
I think it was
2015. Oh, 2016 then, yeah.
Was it the first or the second year? I can't remember. Was it near the beginning? Might have been the first.
Yeah, I think it was the first year.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, coming out of, I remember where it was as well. There was a really tough section and an endless gravel road. And yeah, but anyway, you said you started smoking young. And I started smoking a little younger. I was probably around 10 years old. Yeah. Don't tell my mom; she's not watching this, I don't think. But I started running about a year or so after I quit smoking. But the same sort of thing. It bothered me. I was 43 at the time, but it bothered me that. I was winded at the top of a flight of stairs. The funny thing is,
it's a good test.
Yeah, that was about 18 years ago, 18 years ago. And now when I go up a flight of stairs, I'm still winded, but it's only for about 15 seconds. It's not for 2 minutes like it used to be. Your muscles still need oxygen going up the stairs, right?
Yeah. That is funny.
Yeah. So since you've never really had a formal diagnosis, and you know what, I don't think, talking about my sister, I hope she is watching. My oldest sister struggles with depression, and I don't know if she's had a formal diagnosis or not. I think based on my personality and preferences and so on, I think I might have Asperger's syndrome, which is a high functioning autism. And I don't see, in my position in life, in my state of life, I don't think there's any value in me getting a formal diagnosis. There's no reason for me. I know what's going on. I know consciously what some of my weaknesses are and what some of my strengths are, and I can deal with it as part of my life. And I think probably a lot of people in our age range are maybe similar, right?
That's true.
Have discovered this characteristic of themselves that has caused them problems in the past, and have figured out ways to deal with it, right?
Yeah, you reminded me, I had seasonal affective disorder. I would be miserable in the winter and just grumpy and miserable. And I took up downhill skiing because I ran around the bay. I did around the bay race for a number of years. And that was great because in January, I'd say, oh my God, you better start training. And then when Round the Bay was done, I'd know that the winter was over basically. And then there was a time when even running didn't solve my seasonal affective disorder. And
Right.
we happened to be in a situation where my kids were taking lessons and I learned how to downhill ski, and it was that adrenaline rush.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it changes hormone levels, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Um, interesting. So, Eileen and Reed and you have all kind of indicated that getting out and running, or not just running, but physical activity, so working out in the gym or something like that, downhill skiing, that adrenaline and that change of um, change in your body causes a change in your mental outlook as well, right? Or have been really good for their mental health, for your mental health.
Yeah.
I'll be posting a discussion that I had with a professional soccer player and a therapist. It was um, two of them at the same time, and he said, as a professional athlete, that the sport was his biggest stressor because of performance anxiety and so on. So not playing the sport, not the act of playing the sport, but the act of being in that as a major part of your life was a stressor, and that's a little sad. I think that's different, certainly a different situation than people who have the other job and have a sport as a hobby, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure,
Yeah,
for me.
yeah. Yeah, and something you mentioned in your talk about guys wanting to fix things. I had definitely felt that when I first started letting people know that I'm an advocate for mental health. People would tell me their stories, right?
Uh,
And my first thoughts when people first started sharing their story with me was they're asking for me to help fix them, and I can't do that. I don't know anything. But that's not the case at all, at all, at all.
mm,
There's value in people sharing their story. I hate to say therapy, but
mhm,
um,
mhm,
if I can listen to someone's story and just for a couple minutes help them carry their burden a little bit,
mhm,
there's help in that, right?
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I wonder if the younger generation is a little bit better than
Hmm.
ours.
Yeah, yeah. I'm thinking we're we're seeing probably at least in the last 5 years, a big decrease in the stigma around mental health issues.
Yeah.
Right, it's not completely gone. There's definitely a lot of work ahead of us. I know the people who work in leadership areas, airline pilots, for example, first responders. Um, they're talking a little bit more
Mhm,
about the struggles they're going through, but they still have to be very careful uh, about the way that people perceive them, right?
mhm. Yeah.
Um, so there's definitely some work to be done there, but um, I think the younger generation, it may take a generation to change a mindset, right?
Mhm,
The younger
mhm.
generation has grown up being able to talk about how they feel,
Yeah,
and you and I didn't, right?
that's true.
Yeah, not so much.
I wonder if even the pandemic, having people outdoors more is also something, because I think,
Hmm.
for me, being outdoors is such a gift.
Hmm.
I just hope that people, I mean, so many people have suffered because of the pandemic.
Hmm.
You hope that some people will realize, have been feeling the benefits of being outdoors.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, yeah, but missing a lot of people missing personal contact, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which
Oh,
is
yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, the last couple of questions you've already dealt with. Some of the tools that you found that work for you, you've talked about those.
Mm.
Um, and do you think that mental health is hereditary? So I think you mentioned that as well, and
Yeah.
um,
Yeah,
not
for sure.
necessarily directly, but
Mhm.
uh, risk of, or there's a better word, you had a better word for it,
Mhm.
tendency towards, or something
Yeah,
like that, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
Anyway, I'm very blessed. I know I am. I was born with an optimistic personality. I'm so grateful. As I mentioned, I know I have this white privilege. I was a cute little kid. I got away with stuff that I
Mhm.
probably shouldn't have. Um, and, luckily I had the opportunities to develop.
Mhm.
Like I stayed in school. I knew, stay in school. I don't know what I want to do. Like read. I was just read. He didn't know what he wanted to do. I just knew, keep staying in school and give yourself time to grow up.
Mhm.
And I think that's for a lot of people when they're stuck emotionally is the panic of not knowing, and I
Mhm.
didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I liked the idea of being a teacher, but I thought, is that just because that's what you always dreamed of doing? Is that really what
Mhm.
you want to do? And I gave myself the time and it was what I wanted to do. So I think that's the other thing. People with mental illness need to have compassion for ourselves first.
Mhm.
That's one of the things I've learned from meditation. If we want to have compassion for anybody, we have to start with ourselves.
Mhm. Mhm. For sure. Well, I think that's about it. I think we're about done.
Great.
Um, I'll be posting this um, on IGTV as well as downloading it and putting it up on YouTube later. So you can avoid it if you want. Recordings of myself make me nervous. I feel funny watching myself. Or you can go back and watch it a bunch of times and try to figure out that timeline we talked about.
Oh, I wish I'd said this. I wish I'd said that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if you see it on YouTube, you can insert a bunch of comments. I meant to also say this, right? Anyway, thank you so much for spending the time with us
No,
today,
thank
and
you.
I hope to see you out at a race sometime.
Yes, yes, and thank you for organizing this. It's amazing.
Oh,
You're doing good work. Thanks.
it's my pleasure.
Okay.
Take care.
All right. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.